Hi, everyone, and welcome to Wholesale Change, the webcast and podcast from Distribution Strategy Group, where we offer thought leadership for wholesale change agents like you. Because if you're on this show, you probably are a wholesale change agent. My name is Ian Heller. I'll be your co-host today, along with my business partner. You may know him better as the Doctor of Distribution, Jonathan Bine, PhD. Jonathan, how are you today?
Always a pleasure to work with the most accelerated, amazing apex of alliteration that you are.
Apex of alliteration. That's ironic. I love that. So I'm speaking to you today from the Jasper Park Lodge in Jasper, Alberta, Canada. I just finished keynoting the Canadian Institute of Plumbing and Heating. It's beautiful up here today, Jonathan, but as we have often discussed, the more expensive the hotel, the more expensive and lousier the Wi-Fi. So I'm sitting in a lobby on my iPhone. So you're going to run the slides today. And we have a great guest. We're very excited to talk to Monty Salzman, who's the president of Winsupply Acquisitions Group. But before we introduce Monty, Jonathan, you want to introduce our sponsor? Or I can do it if you'd like.
Please.
Okay. So we want to thank Epicor, because without them, this research wouldn't be possible. And as they like to say, are you finally ready to integrate all of your business functions with an enterprise resource planning system? Or maybe you're struggling with legacy computer systems that just aren't cutting it anymore. Your IT costs seem never ending. Your servers are at the end of their lifespan. Your systems don't talk to each other, and you can't get decent reporting to make informed business decisions. Does that sound like you? At Epicor, they get you and your unique distribution challenges. Epicor has been around for 50 years. Their ERP solutions were designed with distributors for distributors like you. Epicor for Distribution goes beyond the standard ERPs to provide innovative, highly focused solutions that are made for and essential to your business. Learn more about how Epicor has helped thousands of wholesalers succeed by visiting epicor.com/distribution. So thank you, Epicor, for making this show possible. Now, let's introduce our guest, Mr. Monty Salzman, the president of Winsupply Acquisitions Group. Monty, we've had some fascinating discussions with you leading up to your appearance on the Wholesale Change Show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me in, and thank you for doing what you do for the industry as well.
We really appreciate that. And we brought up just a very brief bio slide for those of us who are joining on video. But we have a lot of podcast listeners too. So Monty, perhaps you could sort of walk through your career highlights and education on the slide here.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. As I start to do that, a mentor of mine was telling me about his career, and he said, I spent more time picking out my first couch than my career, and I think I'm not unlike that. I graduated with the obvious degree to get into distribution physics. And so I needed a job, answered an ad in the Sunday paper in the Portland Oregonian in 1987, and went to work for Wesco driving a truck. So that's how I got started, and loved Wesco. It was an incredible place to get started. I'd learned a lot of things that I still believe to this day there. Progressed, in the normal kind of thing, from driving a truck to kind of working in the warehouse, inside sales, outside sales, branch management, regional management, and then had an opportunity to go to Platt Electric Supply. And so I went from being part of a publicly held company in Westinghouse. And by the way, while I was there, Westinghouse sold off Wesco. So I actually got to experience what it was like to get purchased. So now that I'm in acquisitions, I have that firsthand experience of most of the uncertainty and fear and opportunity that comes with being sold. Then I went to a family-held business, Platt Electric Supply, up in the Northwest, and met absolutely amazing people, and just, again, an incredible business model, and spent 3 years there. Went back to Wesco Distribution as it was owned by private equity, came public again. And then had an opportunity after that to go to Johnstone Supply. It was in Portland, where I was regional manager for Wesco, and then had an opportunity to work in HVAC and experience the co-op model. And then 16 years ago, came into contact with Winsupply. They were looking for a chief operating officer. And so Rick Schwartz, who was the CEO and chairman at that time, was leading a search to go outside of the organization for the first time in the organization's history. And I have to question his judgment. He chose me to be the guy they chose to come in as COO. So I moved my whole family from Portland, Oregon to Dayton, Ohio in 2006. And it's just been an absolutely amazing ride for the last 16 years to be part of Winsupply. It's truly unlike anything I have ever seen in any other business model. So that's the history. And I've been very fortunate to have met amazing people along the way, had great mentors, both from the supplier, customer, coworker, and random people. I was going to tell you one of the things that it's interesting looking back, just these random things that come up in life. So part of my resume too was when I was 20, I was a busboy going to college, and you meet all these people who want to tell you, give you your life's advice when you're serving them apple pie and cleaning their dishes. I don't know who, but I remember this like it was yesterday. An older gentleman gave me this career advice. He said, as you think about your career, if you ever have a choice between ownership and income, always take ownership, always. And when you're 20, it's like, why do I still, that's 40 years ago, I still remember that comment. I don't know who it was, but it was really, as I think back the arc of the decisions I've made, that permeates my decision to come to Winsupply, because what makes Winsupply completely unique is this idea of believing in the opportunity for ownership to hundreds of people, thousands of people. So it's pretty amazing.
So maybe you mentioned something pretty intriguing, which is that Winsupply's business model is totally unlike anything else you've ever seen. Why don't you give us a description of what that business model is and contrast it with others, if you don't mind?
Yeah, well, I'll contrast it to the ones that I've been part of, and I think it begins. It certainly is about ownership first and foremost, about providing the opportunity for ownership for hardworking people with entrepreneurial courage. I mean, that's the essence of it, and what makes us distinct is ownership under every single roof. But I also think if you look at the history of Win, it begins in a way that set it on this course that's different than most wholesalers too. And what I mean by that is in 1956, there was a group of just amazing group of people who started what is now Winsupply. And unlike every distributor I have ever met, I'm not saying this is unilaterally, so I have never met, let me say, every distributor I have ever met, if you trace their origin back, it begins with somebody who said, I'm leaving there and starting my own distribution company. I mean, I really have never met anything other than that, other than Winsupply.
Usually accompanied by black and white photos of a truck with grandpa or great grandpa.
Right. And usually grandpa or great grandpa had some sort of a row with his boss and said, I can do it better than him, I'm out of here. Right. And they had that entrepreneurial courage 2, 3, 4 generations to start it. That's how everyone I've ever met started, other than Win. Win started with a very different idea. There were these incredible, really intelligent group of people who, some had been boyhood friends, some were college friends, and they asked a different question. The question was not, how do we start a great distribution company? The question they pondered and now have built a business around was, I wonder if we can build a business around helping capable, hardworking entrepreneurs succeed. And that was industry independent. In fact, in the early days, they tried some things, I think mining and television stations, that did not work out. And with that dream and that vision, that commitment to build a really strong ownership, they stumbled into distribution in 1958. Really almost over a weekend started what has now become the Winsupply model. In the past 64 years, I guess, has grown to hundreds of locations and billions of dollars of revenue. But what I think is so different about it is the concept. It was purpose driven right from the beginning. And the purpose was not to sell more stuff. But guess what? We all have to sell stuff. I love selling stuff. I'm a capitalist. We're capitalists through and through. But it's so different when you begin with a first question that is purpose driven versus money driven and what you can create. And so Win has that history of being this small group of dreamers who asked a really important question, like, how do we serve people by building an opportunity for people who have entrepreneurial courage, but probably didn't have capital or exposure, and help them succeed? So that's the long and short of it. The owner, and that led to an ownership team under every single roof, which is what we aspire to in everything we do.
So Monty, we're going to get to what the value proposition for Win is for an owner today. At the point where there were 0 owner operators under Winsupply, how did they talk them into doing this? What was the value add in 1958 that compelled people to buy into this model?
Well, like a lot of things in life, the old thing that necessity is the mother of invention. So if you go, or sort of desperation, probably, really. So if you go to that first time that they stumbled across the first distribution company, what had happened was there was a company called N.O. Nelson out in Pueblo, Colorado, that had been a plumbing company, and it caught fire. And so there was some connection between the group in Dayton who were starting this company at the time. It was called Primus, and they were searching for entrepreneurs. They heard about this opportunity or this fire out in Pueblo, and they got together. So the group from Dayton flew out to Pueblo, and what they found out there was, lo and behold, a group of hardworking entrepreneurial people who said, listen, we love distribution. We love our customers. We know this market. We will work our tails off, but we don't have any money to get this going. And the group from Dayton said, well, funny you should bring that up, because guess what we have? We have some capital, we have some business guidance, and we have a desire to find a group of people like you that want to have ownership and help you succeed. So it really started through luck and desperation, and then it just worked. I mean, part of why it's grown so much is this is a human need. I mean, this is, so many of us want to live a life where we get to decide how we conduct ourselves every day, and then have the direct rewards for those efforts. And so we, fortunately back in 58, we stumbled into that group, kind of created the business model almost over a weekend. And we've replicated it now hundreds of times under a lot of those same concepts, and just unleashing that human energy to be an owner.
So
Go ahead, Ian.
Oh, sorry. So maybe, Monty, you can give whatever you're willing to share an overview of Winsupply today. Maybe, I don't know if that's the number of companies or definitely the verticals that you're in, the types of businesses you own. Can you give our audience sort of an overview of what Winsupply is today?
Yeah, definitely. And it's so first of all, we do not define ourselves as a wholesale distributor first. Now, we love wholesale. We love it. Okay. But we truly define ourselves, our first purpose is to help create and grow entrepreneurs. That is our first purpose. So once you know that, then you get into the more traditional understanding. So how do you do that? Well, we do that through the vehicle of wholesale distribution. And so we've grown to multiple billions in revenue, 650-ish locations. And we are in the plumbing vertical. We're in electrical, HVAC, waterworks, pipe, valve, and fittings, fire fabrication, pumps, and irrigation. I think I got them all there. And our business model is, and it's interesting when you start with this purpose, the things that you end up doing. So, traditionally strategy is driven about where do you want to grow? You track demographics and industry trends. And yes, all of that matters, but our business model grows when we find an individual who says, I want to be an owner. And so we don't really have specific targets to grow plumbing any faster than electrical, any faster than HVAC. It really is, let's go out and find people who are hardworking, capable entrepreneurs with the courage to take ownership. And so we're pretty agnostic about where and when and which industry, so long as we find people with that right DNA and values and desire.
So if I come to you just as an entrepreneur and I don't have an ongoing business, is that something you entertain, or does it have to be an ongoing business?
It's, well, so it's, we've done all of the above, meaning we have, certainly people have joined us from competitors and started something cold. We certainly do acquisitions. And we have tried people who are simply pure entrepreneurs who want to try it and start something cold. That doesn't tend to work well. Because the runway is, and the learning curve is so great. However, we have had success with taking people who are entrepreneurs from other industries, insurance or finance or banking, and putting them into a leadership role on one of our ongoing businesses. So probably what is the lowest likelihood is if you're just a pure entrepreneur who wants to join Win and start something from scratch. That's a really high failure rate that we don't tend to do.
So, Monty, part of what we talked about in our preparation for this show was your philosophy of leadership. I hope that's not too vague a way to characterize that question. But you made some fascinating points about values, about mentoring, and I thought it would be interesting if you could go through that your way on this call.
Yeah, I'd love to. I guess I would call it less my philosophy and more my learned experiences by getting first kicked in the teeth a lot and knowing what doesn't work, and trying to remain relatively curious and ask a lot of people and have a lot of people who provided a lot of help. So over the years, I kind of got to a point where I started listening a little bit better and seeing patterns. I mean, I will tell you that, a degree in physics, one of the things you do is you kind of look for patterns. It's sort of baked into physics of being, so I'm kind of naturally a person that looks for patterns, and I like to put things into patterns. And so, I've had the opportunity to see, I was thinking about how many different businesses and branches or businesses I've seen over 35 years. It has to have been thousands. I mean, like you guys, we have this opportunity to get in below, behind the front door and actually talk to owners and talk to branch managers. And it's just incredible, isn't it, to get a chance to do that?
Yeah, we feel the same way. I mean, part of one of the best parts of this job is we get to talk to people like you and other distribution executives and manufacturing executives and sometimes software executives, people who have succeeded almost always in the right way. I know on your website, when you go under About Us, usually it's, the team or the history. The first entry in your About Us is our purpose. And, so it says, from the beginning, Winsupply has embraced a philosophy based on helping capable, hardworking people achieve their dreams. That's the first sentence in your About Us section, and that is not common.
It isn't. It is. And it's, so kind of going into broadly my philosophy, it was for me, part of why I left Oregon and joined the organization is, we all have a choice what we do with our lives. And what Win represented for me, and it just so aligned with my experiences, my beliefs, and my values, is that this is an organization that was striving to create opportunity. Believe me, we do not pay for hard work, but we reward results. Very capitalistic in that sense. But it's results at the local level. This opportunity to create, we talk about creating millionaires and financial independence for hundreds and thousands of people. I just found that so fascinating. And so as I got the great fortune to join the organization, I had a title that put me in a position to kind of have to talk to people about, I would go recruit young people and say, this is the opportunity. And I would get asked, it's very compelling for somebody to say, oh yeah, I definitely want to achieve financial freedom. And Win does provide that opportunity. Who wouldn't be attracted by that as a first pass? But then they ask you, okay, now how? Okay, what do I actually do every day? It's kind of like, okay, you want to be a PGA player, get really good at putting. Okay, but how? Right? What are the exercises? What are the details of it? So I was in my prior role, I was really in a position to have to recruit people, and they were relying on us and me and our team to give them guidance on how do you actually do it. And so actually what ended up happening was I was getting prepared to give a speech about 6 years ago, and I wanted to talk about Wynn's opportunity for financial freedom for everybody who followed our system. And I did have people start asking me the next level question, like, okay, how? Like, sounds good, but how? And so I was forced to look in the mirror and say, can I answer that question? Can I give somebody the specific exercises and daily disciplines on how to achieve financial freedom and enjoy this entrepreneurial dream that we talk about? And so because of that, getting, again, desperation, right? Getting ready for a speech, I took the time to really just put into a system all of the things that I've learned over the years. I don't think I've got one original idea. I really don't think I've got a single original idea. I think probably how I put them together is my uniqueness, but there's not a single thing that you haven't heard from somebody else in here.
Well, that's the nature of the internet, right? We all learn that we've never thought of anything original, right? Because if you Google it,
right.
someone else has come up with it, but you had to put them together.
Yeah, right. And so once I put them together, I would tell you it really started for me focusing all of my conversations around consistently repeating and talking about these practices. It was incredibly helpful exercise as a leader, as a person who had the responsibility for being in front of people, to not sound like the book of the week, you know? So once I ultimately developed my principles, I then began speaking pretty much exclusively in terms of this to reinforce it. And so, you know, the first one really began with this idea of demanding the best of yourself. And again, it's certainly demanding the best of ourselves is not something I created. You can go all the way back to Stoic philosophers, and they, you know, there's that concept of how much. I think one of the questions they ask is how much longer are you going to wait before you begin to demand the best of yourself? Like, what a great question, right? And so that is, to me, sort of at the heart of entrepreneurial success, probably success in life, but just grappling with that question, like, how much longer am I going to wait before I start to demand the best of myself? Now, I don't have some kind of on-off switch that you decide to do it every day and then you're perfect. It's going to be a struggle every day. You're going to get up every day, and some days you're not going to actually achieve it. Some days you're going to slip backwards. But just that, when that becomes part of your thinking, to say, over the arc of my career, I'm going to give space to this question of, am I demanding the best of myself? And then the other thing that I think is so important to that is, you know, if you think about we all have a time in the day where we're just on. For me, it's like 6 to 7 in the morning. It's my best energy. My thoughts are my clearest. You know, it's when it's my best energy and my best time. So I think one of the things that's really important, if we're going to get on this personal journey to get better, is asking ourselves not only the question of, am I going to decide to demand the best of myself, but am I going to use some of my best energy, my best time intentionally on that question on a pretty consistent basis? So that was kind of the first part of it, and kind of helping people think, man, if you're struggling, here's a good question to grapple with. What are you doing with your best time and energy? Are you putting it to use intentionally? You know, and if we're not, that's a pretty good place to start, right? Like, if I'm not getting the results I want, how am I spending my time? So kind of began there. And then I got a little more deep into what the things that I put down. And the categories are ownership, they are expertise, relationships, communication, and what I call GPWYW. And I've codified it. I put it into an acronym, because what it stands for is getting paid what you're worth. And, you know, if that falls into the hands of people who don't have context, they could certainly interpret that as trying to be, you know, raise your prices or something, but it's worded very carefully. It's get paid what you're worth. And so for me, I kind of begin with that as the end point of this whole thing, and then work back through ownership, expertise, communication, and relationships. And so my view of of capitalism and commerce is that it is a fair, a balanced exchange of money for services and products. And I can tell you the vast extent of my experiences in distribution is it always felt like I was, well, not always, it typically felt like I was getting paid less than we deserved as distribution. I mean, distributors do so much. I mean, think about what distributors do. They go out and buy a big warehouse. They house thousands of products, buy trucks, buy insurance, train people, carry all this credit. Well, all these people who are developing expertise for vendors distributors will crawl through fire generally for their customers. And we end up arguing over a penny or two. And it's like, what in the world? So, so that getting paid what you're worth is worded very carefully. And so I think, again, in terms of wanting to teach people a mindset, it is, you have a right to get paid what you're worth. That's not gouging people. In fact, if you're getting paid less than you're worth, it's kind of like being bullied and stolen from. Now, the converse of that is you do not have a right to charge one penny more than you're worth, right? I mean, you really do have to deliver a fair exchange. So that was sort of the end point of asking ourselves, am I in that mindset? And as, again, because I saw people over 35 years who just kind of naturally came by this attitude of, I am not going to cut my price. I'm worth it. And then seeing how often that played out okay for them, as opposed to this fear of, oh, I got to cut my price. And I just thought that was such an eye opener to learn that. So that's the system ultimately of ownership, expertise, relationships, communication, kind of culminating in earning the right to get paid what you're worth.
Yeah, that's fascinating. What a great approach. I'm sure the audience finds that as interesting as I do. And I think you're right. It's easy to undervalue your contribution, which I find to be more commonly the case with distributors rather than gouging people on price. Now, a lot of what you talk about, you've mentioned the word teaching a few times. When you acquire these companies, do you encourage or require them to put in a standard operating system, the way that management manages its initiatives, and a standard set of dashboards? And I would assume that since you acquired and integrated so many companies, you have a system that you think works really well, and you at least encourage them to use it. But I don't really know. How do you go about ensuring these companies are operated well? It is important that they operate consistently between each other.
Well, I think the answer ultimately is yes, but it begins way, way, way up the line. And that is, when I go talk to somebody about an acquisition, the first thing that I want to find out is, do we have the same beliefs and the same values? And, if you think about a person who's in a position to sell their business, it's this first question idea is such an interesting thing to me. Like, what is the first question we're asking ourselves on sales calls, or even in selling your business? I can tell you the most frequent first question I get asked by sellers is, what's my business worth? And I think that's a really relevant question. You have something of value. Of course, that's a relevant question. But having watched what Win did with a different first question, I think another relevant question is, how can I serve people by selling my business? Or what kind of legacy can I create for people as I sell my business? And ours is probably the most hidden kind of potential legacy. And it doesn't make it right for everybody. But if I come across a family or a group of people that want to contemplate that question and say, you know what, it's really important to me, of course you're going to get a fair price for your business. But if they're also driven by this excitement and this value to say, wow, you're telling me that in Win, the people who help build my family wealth and my wealth, you're going to give them a chance to have that same opportunity from here going forward. And if that appeals to them, that's the basis of doing an acquisition, more so than price. I think it was Simon Sinek who said, the key in life isn't to do business with people who have what you have or it's the key is to do people who believe what you believe. So that's where every acquisition begins with, I don't know if we believe the same things. And if we don't, that's fine. Our beliefs are our beliefs, yours are our, they're all fine. But man, when we have the same beliefs, anything after that is possible. And so what Win has been building since 1956 is this system that supports that pursuit of the entrepreneurial journey in its operating system, in its procedures, in its structure, in its language, in how we flow money and ideas and everything around. So yes, we definitely have as an endpoint an ownership team under every roof. Now, what's flexible is how long and how we get there. And that is entirely customized based upon the characteristics of the business that we acquire. If it's a single location and the team's ready to buy in, that can go quick. But if it's multiple locations, that's going to take longer. And we have to be very fiscally responsible too. We don't want to come in on day one and say, hey, we're the smartest people ever, we're going to change everything and destroy the earnings and people leave. It's the last thing we want. I mean, we really want to enter into a relationship with a team that says, oh my gosh, this is finally my opportunity to own a piece. I remember when Wesco got sold, I might have been 32 years old. I was running a branch in Albany, Oregon. It was $8 million in total sales. And I had all of the state of Oregon outside of Portland as my territory. And it was really the first time I remember thinking, my gosh, if I could buy this territory as a franchise, as an owner, I would love that. And of course, that didn't happen. I had to wait till I got to Win to become an owner. But that's really that kind of energy. And if we begin with that alignment, the details that for me, I kind of see there's a lot of work to get onto our system. A lot. There's a lot of things to learn. But if the first question is, do we want to have an opportunity for our people to become owners? All of the rest of that becomes tactics and tasks rather than strategy issues. And believe me, I have encountered plenty of people who said, I don't want that for my people. I don't want to change your computer system. And the seller has all of the power on who they sell to. And that's fine, but so we know what we believe in, and we know some things over 64 years of how to enhance and accelerate and give people the greatest odds of achieving that entrepreneurial success. So yeah, we do need to get them and want to get them onto our system because it propels that pursuit of financial freedom and entrepreneurial success.
So Monty, when they get acquired, there is a price and they get some level of wealth creation. What is the wealth creation that happens after acquisition? What does that look like?
Yeah, so what we do ultimately, let's just talk about the end. I don't want to talk about the transition because there's a period from where it was to where we become the traditional ownership team under every roof. And so let's talk about that going forward. Again, that could take months to several years to get to that, but that's where the real opportunity for wealth creation begins in Winsupply. So, if you just think about monetary things, certainly we have salary. Win has the single most generous profit sharing. I told you I've worked at several places in the past. I've never seen a profit sharing that is as generous as the Winsupply model, and it's based under each roof. Now, we're not the only ones that do that. There's other people that do that. What we layer on top of that, and in addition to that, is actual ownership in that entity. So there's a significant percentage of the equity, the ownership shares of each rooftop that local team can acquire. And that equity does two things. Their equity grows over time, so the share price grows over time. And we are all C corporations. So one of the distinctions of a C corporation is that we pay out dividends, and it's a way to repay earnings. And those dividends get distributed back amongst the people who are owners of their business. So in addition to almost everybody has salary plus profit sharing. We have both, although the profit sharing is singularly the most amazing one I've ever seen. And then layer on top of that dividends and share growth, and you are in control of those things based upon how well you perform.
So as an owner operator, under my roof, I guess I'm presuming that all owner operators participate in this. How do the rank and file participate, if at all?
Yeah, so we have a certain percentage of ownership available, and that gets distributed up amongst the employees of each rooftop. And so we do not, first of all, we don't call our locations branches, we call them local companies, because everyone is actually a legally incorporated C corporation. And frankly, we're proud of the fact that they are corporations and not branches. Each of those local companies has a president, and it really is up to the local president to develop a strategy on how he or she wants to use the equity available. And so we have a range of philosophies, and it's very local. I have seen some presidents say, listen, I want every single person that works here to have at least a share. And so we've got places where, a brand new truck driver owns maybe 2 shares, all the way to probably the most clustered would be, some people say, hey, it's me and one other person, they're my core person. But there's a range based upon how a local president wants to use equity to motivate their team and create their go-to-market strategy. But I will tell you, it's fascinating to see. It's absolutely fascinating to see. One of the things I think is such good logic. If you were to turn on CNBC, you would probably hear a CEO interviewed, and they would probably talk about how we want our people to act like owners, right? I mean, think about how many times you've heard or read a CEO repeat that exact phrase. We want to create a culture where our people act like owners. Yeah, great idea. Genius idea, actually. Of course we do. Now, I would tell you, this is maybe a part where I'm a little bit, I don't know, I might sound a little arrogant here, but every time I hear that, we want them to act like owners, I kind of quietly laugh to myself and go, our people aren't actors.
Right. Or
They're not
what are
actors.
you doing to really make that happen?
They're
For the people
actual
who want to
owners.
act like owners, right?
Right. Yeah. And there's a distinction. I mean, we all, Hollywood's filled with actors. They don't tend to get a lot of people ready. So, I mean, that's one of the things, like what Win is built around, is this idea of you're an actual owner. And I will tell you, the subtle and the obvious changes that it makes in people is amazing. So, in some of those places where they've said, listen, we want everybody to be an owner. I've seen places where, you got maybe a 22-year-old, I'm actually thinking of one specifically, but a guy named Ben, I think he was 22 years old. He was a truck driver at the time. Maybe he had $2,000 worth of ownership. And he would come back from jobs and, get in the salesman's face and go, hey, this is our customer. Why are you letting these other people sell? So it just creates an amazing change in the conversation. But
well, what's interesting is, if we look at the kinds of companies you've worked for, you were reeling them off. You've worked for public, you worked for PE backed, you worked for Win, you worked for Co-op. ESOP was the one that you have not worked for.
Right.
But what it sounds like is that this vignette that you just described is a vignette that an ESOP CEO might describe about one of his or her employees, right? Mm-hmm. Where people do start to act like, hey, this is my $2,000. I've got $2,000 worth of this company. I'm an owner. And they have a different mentality. So it sounds like it's a similar benefit, different mechanism that Win has achieved.
I think there are definitely some parallels between it. One of the distinctions that I have heard is that we do it under every single rooftop. Mm-hmm. And so you really do feel the gas pedal when you step on it. Like your team, like you can get together today and decide this is where we're going. And so I think, in addition to that sense of shared ownership, when you chunk it down even further to an ownership under every roof, what it does is it puts an ownership team in front of customers very directly, with empowerment to do it. And think about our own experience as consumers. I mean, isn't it generally true for most of us that when we buy from a business that's led by a very active owner, whether it's a restaurant or a bike shop or a tailor, when that owner is involved with customers, for me, it's the richest way of spending my money anywhere. It's just so much better. And because it's just in every way. So that's really what Win does. And I would say in contrast to even a branch net, it puts that ownership feel directly in contact with the customers that are buying from that location.
So let's play this forward, perhaps for other segments or other industries. You've got a unique and interesting model. Is this something that could be applied to other industries? If so, is it, I mean, to other segments of distribution? If so, is it restricted to businesses that are primarily branch-based and have a strongly local flavor? So, for example, an industrial might it not work for certain parts of industrial because they're DC-based? Talk us through about how this might apply to other segments.
Well, so I've thought a lot about that, and I can't tell you that I have a definitive answer.
Okay.
But here's one thing I've learned, and that is, I think what is at the heart of what makes Win work, and this is transportable anywhere.
Okay.
I think when you have two or more or thousands of people that believe the same thing and want to accomplish the same thing, you're probably going to make pretty significant progress towards it, right? And so with that, I tend to think if you had people of that mindset in any industry, they could probably figure out something to make it work. Now, I guess the one thing where I've thought about, could this work in hair salons, in bike shops, in restaurants, or manufacturing, and I don't see any reason why it could not. The only thing that I think might be a place where it wouldn't work, and by the way, we have distribution centers. We just added another one in Oklahoma. We're adding them. We're a DC-based organization as well. I think maybe the one place where it would struggle the most is where the industry is already consolidated pretty significantly, and I think it probably might not be relevant there. I think it's still relevant where there's a very large local relationship component. So if you look through the lens of the customer and why they make buying choices, if they still have the opportunity to choose locally and prefer that, which is a huge percentage of America's commerce, that I think there is some version of this that could definitely work.
And I think that local flavor applies broadly throughout the construction world, the PEM, plumbing, electrical, mechanical world. It may or may not apply in certain parts of the industrial world, right?
Right.
I mean, because some of the industrial distribution is purely DC based. There's not a branch. There's not a big local flavor. So just my thought. You probably thought about it more deeply.
Yeah. But we're so busy doing what we're doing, I don't think about it a lot. So.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to run out of opportunities anytime soon.
Right.
When you make an acquisition, what do you think is the most surprising thing for your new owner partners? Whether that's something that delights them, something that they struggle with, or both.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think that one of the things that probably surprises them is that they still feel like they run their local business. And now that's not, there are definitely more controls and process in place than before, because we do have a system that needs to work and do all of those things. But I think the surprise is that they still feel like they're in control. And it's really easy to walk through somebody and say, that nothing's going to change. We're not going to be checking up on you Friday at 3:00. And they're like, yeah, you probably are. And then we don't. And they're like, wow, you guys, everything you said would happen did happen. In fact, that was one of the greatest comments I got just recently. One of the recent acquisitions called me up afterward and said, Monty, everything you said would happen happened exactly like you said it would. And that's always, that's exciting to hear. And I think one of the things that people are also very surprised by is that the earnings opportunity is still there for them, the autonomy, the earnings opportunity. And I think in general, if you think about some of the big pressures that independents and small independents are facing, it's getting tougher and tougher to be on your own. Vendor consolidation is happening. E-commerce is creating a huge expense to the business, not only in money, but in terms of the time you spend learning about it. So that's a huge new investment of time. We're solving those problems for people, and I think they appreciate that. I think probably the things that are frustrating for anybody are the normal change things of like, ideally you would have paid me all this money and nothing would have changed. That would have been perfect. And things do change. There are some procedures and bylaws and guidance that we have, and they do have now. I mean, it used to be that, hey, I could decide to go buy a truck. Well, now I gotta fill out I gotta take 5 minutes to fill out something on the internet and get other people to sign off on it. And if a person doesn't get hung up on those things, we've created a pretty streamlined process. But those kind of things change, and you can choose to focus on whatever you want. If somebody chooses to focus on those things, that's going to be the predominant thing. But if they tend to say, wow, this solves a lot of problem for me, I got a nice liquidity event, I get to help people succeed, and I think it's a pretty good deal all the way around.
It sounds like you're able to. One of the things that happens with entrepreneurs is when they get acquired, they quickly lose interest, right? Because the environment is not entrepreneurial, right? Which is what they grew up on, what they thrive on. Sounds like you're able to retain entrepreneurs at an astonishing rate relative to other companies that are doing lots of acquisitions.
I think we've been very successful, and to me, that's the single most important thing when we begin to talk to each other is we're instantly trying to figure out, do they believe what we believe? Will they want that afterwards? Will they just get a payday and leave? And I think when we're open about those conversations, I think I think we have a really good track record of getting to the right place with people. I mean, there's, the people that own these businesses in this industry, this business is filled with amazing people. It's filled with honest, hardworking, caring people. And when we lay out what we're trying to accomplish, if somebody says, that's not me, and usually they will. And so we don't do a deal, and that's perfect. I don't think I've ever had anybody mislead us intentionally. And so we do kind of rely on not only our instincts, but just an open conversation about what people want going forward. And we've had people we've done deals where the owners have said, we're out of here, and they have a management team behind them that's going to get that opportunity. That's worked. We've had people who said, listen, I want to stick around 2 years. Then we've got to bring in somebody either from my organization and get them ready, or somebody from the outside. That has worked. And we've had people who've stayed around for decades, and that has worked. Really, there's no reason to presume that it won't work, because we've done all flavors. But again, it's key, that conversation up front of, do we believe the same things? Do we want the same things going forward? And that's the heart of why we've been very successful in retaining and making things work.
Great. So we're going to be wrapping up pretty soon, but if anyone in the audience has a question, please use the Q&A button. Now, Monty, my experience with acquisitions is that integrating the cultures is the hardest part. And so you really have to screen for that up front.
Definitely.
But then integrating the IT systems is sort of the second hardest. What's your experience in terms of the challenges of integration?
Well, if the cultures don't match, then don't do the deal. It's really that simple. Hopefully not to use a bad analogy, but there is a reason why all denominations of religion exist, and proselytizing doesn't tend to work. Just go to the church you believe in, right? It's sort of in that same vein. Like, we're not going to, if there's not an entrepreneurial courage, if there's not this idea of people wanting to have ownership, then we're just the wrong choice. And we shouldn't get upset. We shouldn't judge one another. Heck, I'll even buy the coffee to find out if that's the case. But I love having that conversation I'd like to have that conversation with anybody that owns a distribution company before they're even for sale, to say, how could it work? And I think it's actually good preparation on behalf of anybody that owns a distribution company to frankly call me and say, hey, let's have a conversation. I want to know, either near term or long term or never, I want to know your system so I can evaluate for me and my family and my other shareholders, so I know more, so I educate myself. But if there's not a culture fit, it just isn't going to work. for either side. Everybody's going to end up miserable. But life's too short and there's too much opportunity to try to make that work. From an IT integration, I think that's two things. I think it's first attitude and work. And even when you get an upgrade on a system that you're used to, it's work. And I find this change code. You were guys talking about yourselves being a change agent. I think it's a really interesting question about change. And here's what I mean by that. If you were to ask, try this actually, go to anybody and say, fill in the blank to this sentence. If you get what you've got, you'll get blank. I mean, let's just try it out here. How do you fill in the blank?
Sorry, I was muted. Ask that one more time, Monty.
If you do what you've always done, you'll get
what you've always got.
Right. We have become conditioned as a society to believe what I think is a false statement. I actually think that statement is false. And what I mean by that is, I think if you do what you've always done, you'll actually get less. If you do what you've done, you're going to get less. Because think it, we're in a competitive capitalistic model. People are changing all around us. They're coming after us. If we do the same, they're going to consume what we used to have. So yeah, I think
the corollary or the equivalent of that is, if you don't change, you're falling behind, right? I mean, that's you've heard that expression as well. It seems like it's synonymous with what
very true. Right? But so I just think it's interesting as we think about our attitude through life is, am I a person that shows up that embraces this idea of I have to change to have a shot at getting what I want? Because if you reason it through, you have to reach the conclusion, if I keep doing what I've always done, I'm actually not going to get what I want. So therefore I have to change. And so I think beginning with this attitude of being, and I think this is such an important thing for especially employees. Don't be a person that resists change. If you want to be a good employee, a good contributor to your organization, embrace change and do it with the idea that, hey, I have to get even. So I think when it comes to an IT switch, that's such an important attitude, just to say, yeah, of course it's going to change, and then it's work. You got to learn new keystrokes. You got to learn different screens. And that's nothing other than work and repetition. But we have teams that know how to do it. And if we've got people with the right attitude, we get them through it. And we know how to do that pretty successfully.
Just a quick question from our audience on what is the ERP system that Win uses, and is it used throughout the company?
Yeah, we use it once we get everybody integrated over. We use an internal system called WISE. It's developed internally. Mm-hmm. So if you think about our business model, we have 650 C corporations. So we have to have P&Ls, balance sheets, cash flow statements, list of all the assets at each location. And there's no off-the-shelf system that does that. And in addition, we have a huge amount of mechanism built on to make decisions about acquiring new things and signing leases. So those two things work in sync very efficiently. Mm-hmm. So we built our own system back in the 70s. And so it's a proprietary system, and we're constantly investing millions and millions of dollars in it, trying to stay up to date on what are the latest things that the other folks are doing, and bringing in the bolt-ons that do things like signature capture and, local scanning and all those things. So yeah, it is a huge piece of our success. It's internally developed, and it's also, by doing it ourselves, we can actually model it on the things that we care about and value, and it can actually guide people towards entrepreneurial success and good decision making.
Makes all the sense in the world. Yeah.
Well, we are almost out of time. Monty, thank you so much for your time today. It was a fascinating conversation. I know Jonathan's going to show. It's our pleasure. But I think Jonathan's going to show your contact information here in a second, so people can get a hold of you via, is it ML Salzman at winsupplyinc.com?
Yeah, or just use that number and call me. I am an open book. So if you want to get a hold of me, email me or call me. You don't have to have an invitation. Or this is the invitation. Call me.
So for their podcast listeners, it is MLSALSMAN at winsupplyinc.com, or you can reach Monty at 937-608-8234. Now, a quick word about our upcoming programs. On June 29th, I'll be doing a webinar called How Great Distributors Use Marketing to Dominate. That's brought to you by our friends at HMI Performance Incentives and Connexium. These are repeat sponsors who have supported and funded our research several times over the last couple of years. On June 22nd, we'll have our next episode of the Wholesale Chain Show. Our guest will be Alex Malazid, who's the founder and CEO at Applico. That will be brought to you again by Epicor, another regular sponsor. So that's it for today. Monty, I hope you'll come back if we invite you. We really enjoyed it, and thanks again for your time today.
Likewise, thank you.
Yeah, it's great to talk to you. Jonathan, I'll see you back in Colorado soon. Until then, I hope everyone has a successful business throughout the remaining days of June. That's been the Wholesale Chain Show for today. Thanks, everyone, and goodbye.